The Caribbean Times News with Alisha Davis.
Welcome to the Caribbean Times News Year in Review. I'm Alisha Davis. Well, 2020 has been an unforgettable year with the coronavirus pandemic spreading all across the globe, impacting billions of lives. To date, more than 75 million cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed around the world, with more than 1.5 million lives lost. Our hearts go out to all of those who are struggling with this unimaginable suffering and loss, as too many places are currently experiencing their highest case counts since the pandemic began. Well, it's no surprise that around the world, economies are reeling. In the Caribbean, many nations have been devastated financially as the tourism industry, the biggest industry in the Caribbean, has ground to a halt.
The Caribbean region's economies ranks among the most travel and tourism dependent economies in the world. And this has exposed our people and our economies in a way that we have not experienced since becoming independent nations more than 50 years ago in some instances. The closing of our borders and the trebling of unemployment and the reduction of our government revenues by half have created grave challenges for many of us.
Economic devastation wasn't only lost government revenue, of course. Citizens lost jobs in record numbers, and all those people who depend on tourism are now struggling to put food on the table. Now, women who dominate the tourism industry have also been at greater risk of violence during the pandemic. A United Nations report shows that incidents of domestic violence have increased around the world since stay-at-home orders were put in place. And we spoke about this important issue with Marcia Hines-Lane, advocate and president of the National Organization of Women of Barbados.
The joblessness is a significant issue. Whereas a woman is able to support herself and her children pre-pandemic, she's now a lot more dependent sometimes on, that abusive partner. Some partners have now become abusive where they were not abusive before, because it has a lot to do, the abuse has a lot to do with the power dynamics. So she has no job, there are not a lot of choices, and that situation in itself can give rise to abuse.
And with a COVID-19 vaccine on the horizon, there is hope that the end of the pandemic is coming in 2021. We recently spoke to Dr. William Morris, Executive Medical Director of Cleveland Clinic Innovations, about the vaccine.
One need not be a nurse or a physician to be a healthy skeptic. We should understand what the performance is, and we need to trust the science to scientists and trust the data to those who are producing it. And only then do we say, yes, this is actually in the best interest for the public good, and the safety profile, the efficacy, meaning how well it performs, is one that warrants vaccination. It should not be politicized. COVID is not a political issue. It's a global issue, and the science needs to be the overwhelming North Star.
Before we take a quick break, a few words from Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley.
My friends, there was life before COVID-19, and I know that there will be life after COVID-19.
When we come back, we will have more on the year's biggest political stories, including a woman of Caribbean descent, Kamala Harris, headed to the White House, and a record-breaking storm season in the Atlantic. We'll tell you what it means for Caribbean countries going forward. Stay with us. Caribbean Times News is expanding its reach, and businesses now have super exciting options to reach thousands of potential customers. From traditional paper, digital, and video. Join the Caribbean Times News family today at CaribbeanTimesNYC.com. Our newspaper and website reach over 70,000 unique readers through Brooklyn and Queens, and 30,000 plus monthly online visitors. And now, video. Watch the new Caribbean Times News with Alisha Davis online at www.facebook.com/Caribbean Times News. Now is the time to snap up competitive advertising rates. Reach people right in their living rooms. Call 718-909-1841 for advertising rates and other information. Welcome back to the Caribbean Times News Year in Review. Well, 2020 has been a groundbreaking year in politics, with Caribbean women and men around the world rising to history-making positions. With Joe Biden defeating Donald Trump to win the U.S. presidency, Kamala Harris became the first woman and the first person of color elected vice president of the United States.
All the women who have worked to secure and protect the right to vote for over a century. Tonight, I reflect on their struggle, their determination, and the strength of their vision to see what can be unburdened by what has been. And I stand on their shoulders. But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
Harris is the daughter of immigrants who came to the U.S. in pursuit of higher education and rose to prominence in their fields. Her Jamaican father as an economics professor at Stanford and her Indian mother as a breast cancer researcher. Well, with her tough questioning of nominees in their confirmation hearings,
I think you've made it clear that you've not looked at the evidence. We can move on. I think you've made it clear, sir, that you've not looked at the evidence, and we can move on. You have an impeccable memory. You've been speaking for almost 8 hours, I think more, with this committee about all sorts of things you remember. Yeah. How can you not remember whether or not you had a conversation about Robert Mueller or his investigation with anyone at that law firm?
So what if there's
I think you're thinking of someone you don't want to tell us.
And her performance at the vice presidential debate, Kamala Harris is not afraid of a fight.
He said because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, but
here.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking.
Yep.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the fact. Yeah, I'm about to. $400,000
He said he's
a
going
year.
to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
it'd be important if you said the truth.
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
People's Politics host Marlon Hill gave us some insight on just how significant Harris's win is.
Very significant, huge part of our history. First Black woman, first South Asian Indian woman, first Caribbean American of descent, first HBCU graduate. There's so many firsts for her. And I believe that the entire America should be celebrating this and hoping that we can find a way to unify on celebrating this moment of exceptionalism for us as Americans as well.
And in Guyana, the country witnessed a 5-month-long election dispute between the nation's two leading political parties, with People's Progressive Party member Muhammad Irfan Ali eventually declared the winner, becoming the 9th president of Guyana. Well, with the election's legitimacy still being challenged in the Supreme Court, he had this to say to us about his win.
It really, I am who I am, you know. I know it can be a proud moment for Muslims, but for me, I'm here to serve every single person. I am here as a human who practices Islam, but I am here as a human, and I'm here to do my best in serving humanity, in ensuring that in the days I serve, that I do so with the greatest humility, and I do so in the greatest interest of the people I serve.
In Belize, Johnny Briseño won the general election after 12 years of being led by conservative Prime Minister Dean Barrow, and Briseño pledged to do the necessary work to move the nation forward.
That the work ahead will not be easy, but that our work is first and foremost to serve the people and to move Belize forward.
2020 also saw a number of re-elections, including Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness, Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Keith Rowley, Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris of St. Kitts and Nevis, and Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who urged women to take an active interest in politics.
And I want to ask the young women and not so young women to take an interest in active politics so that you can become replacements of one or more, hopefully more, of candidates who ran the last time and who may not be contesting again. We need to have more women in the parliament.
And speaking of women in politics, in Jamaica, Senator Gabriela Morris, at the age of 23, became the youngest Jamaican ever appointed to the Senate. The young senator, who has placed education and women's issues at the top of her agenda, was one of a record 8 women appointed to the Jamaican Senate in 2020. Another groundbreaker, Representative Chevron Jones, became the first openly gay state senator to be elected in Florida. And in New York, the NYPD appointed Jamaican-born Michael King the head of the specialized unit that deals with sex crimes, domestic violence, and child abuse. Here is what he told us about his appointment and what it means to him.
This is extremely significant. This is something I have worked for my entire career. I just made 20 years in the NYPD this past September. And with my specialized forensic nursing background, this is something that I have tried to do to get into special victims when I was a sergeant. And I wasn't able to get in. I got drafted to the Internal Affairs Bureau instead. As a lieutenant, I tried again. I wasn't able to get in. And I think now with the police commissioner finding out about my specialized background, he decided I with my diverse investigative background as well, that I should be the person to lead this division. And so far in the 1 month, it's been very, very hectic, but it's been a great experience as well.
And coming up on our year in review, a record-breaking storm season, a historic movement for justice, and a holiday celebration. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Caribbean Times News Year in Review. And what a year it's been for weather, with a historic hurricane season in the Atlantic. 2020 broke all kinds of records, with the most ever named storms in one season, causing billions of damage in the Caribbean. Reporter Cecil Murkerson joins us from the U.S. National Weather Center in Georgia with more on this extraordinary storm season. Hello, Cecil.
That's right, Alisha. We're outside the National Weather Service, where experts are telling us that this year's Atlantic storm season, which ran from June to November, is one for the record books.
Dramatic images of flooding, as well as homes destroyed and damaged roads in the British Virgin Islands after a record-breaking storm season in the Caribbean. 2020 has seen 31 named storms, the most ever. In fact, there have been so many storms, the World Meteorological Organization ran out of names on its alphabetical list in September, forcing the agency to turn to Greek letters for storm names. And it's not just the number of storms. Hurricane Iota in November was the strongest storm to hit so late in the calendar year ever recorded. All activity has scientists focusing on climate change, which they say is causing stronger, wetter, and more destructive storms.
We know sea surface temperatures are getting warmer, and that is a link to climate change. In fact, you can see from this map, the Atlantic is well above seasonal for anomalous temperatures right now.
In fact, the Barbados-based Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology states that several heat records were broken in the Caribbean in 2020. In September, Dominica and Grenada and Puerto Rico all broke national and territorial all-time high heat records.
We can draw a better connection of the buildup of greenhouse gases to the surface warming and also to the sea level rise that's going on in the Atlantic Basin. So where we have sea level rise going on, that means the hurricanes are riding in on a higher baseline sea level.
The Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell, spoke at a CARICOM meeting emphasizing the importance of climate change.
This is crucial because a lot of the resources, the $10 billion, is meant to deal with the whole question of climate change and resilience and disasters and so on.
Right. At that CARICOM meeting, The Prime Minister also added that the coming years will be crucial to be tackling climate change, as leadership is required to reverse some of the effects going forward.
And now, Cecil, speaking of the environment, another big environmental story in the Caribbean in 2020 was that oil spill off the coast of Venezuela.
Yes, that's right, Alisha. But experts and independent scientists and activists remain concerned about the potential oil spill in the Caribbean Sea going forward.
Yeah, there's potential for a major disaster there, and we're going to be keeping an eye on it. Thank you, Cecil. And now coming up, we will look at this historic year for protest movements, as well as entertainment in 2020. Stay with us. Caribbean Times News is expanding its reach, and businesses now have super exciting options to reach thousands of potential customers. From traditional paper, digital, and video. Join the Caribbean Times News family today at CaribbeanTimesNYC.com. Our newspaper and website reach over 70,000 unique readers through Brooklyn and Queens and 30,000 plus monthly online visitors. And now, video. Watch the new Caribbean Times News with Alisha Davis online at www.facebook.com/Caribbean Times News. Now is the time to snap up competitive advertising rates. Reach people right in their living rooms. Call 718-909-1841 for advertising rates and other information. Welcome back to the Caribbean Times News Year in Review. Well, 2020 will not only be remembered as the year of the pandemic, it will also be remembered for the protests and the fight for change, justice, and equality. Technology has been instrumental in capturing instances of police abuse or racism, which too often has led to the murder of unarmed Black men, including George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Rayshard Brooks, among too many others. And in too many cases, like that of Breonna Taylor, the young woman who was fatally shot in her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, the justice that so many desperately want has yet to be served. Now, the one officer who is being charged here is being charged for endangering Breonna's neighbors. None of the officers who shot Breonna are being charged. What do you make of that decision?
I think it's a decision that justifies all of the protests that you see going on all over the country, the anger, the frustration that is being felt by the African-American community, because we have a situation which is without question that Breonna Taylor is dead. It is without question that she died at the hands of the police. But yet the one single charge that was filed against one police officer had absolutely nothing to do with Breonna Taylor's death, or nothing to do with Breonna Taylor's apartment. We're talking about charging the police for endangering or recklessly discharging his firearm because he shot into the neighbor's apartment, not anything to do with the death of Breonna Taylor. And that's why people are very frustrated throughout this country.
And in Guyana, protests broke out following the gruesome murder of Isaiah Henry and Joel Henry and the alleged retaliation killing of Haresh Singh. The murders of the young boys were deemed politically motivated by some members of the country's opposition party and supporters, most notably Mr. Rickford Burke. Now, you were one of the first to speak out against the brutal murders of Isaiah and Joel Henry, placing the blame on the current governing party, the PPP, saying, quote, they encouraged, they engendered, they promoted it. Why do you hold the president's party accountable?
Well, the president's party has been engendering fear and racial insecurities in the country. They traditionally use that as a means of mobilizing political support for elections. And they did that. From the commencement of the election campaign, the president, Mr. Jagdeo, who's the leader of the president's party, went to Berbice and called on his supporters to attack the president if he comes into their towns. He says, chase them out, chase out the ministers, chase out the prime minister. That perception is that they can do this, they can do whatever they want.
Guyana's President Mohamed Irfan Ali told us that his government is doing everything possible to achieve justice in these ongoing murder investigations.
Indeed, we are coming out of a little bit of a difficult patch with the horrific incident in which 3 young boys were murdered, and we are working very hard, assiduously, to bring those criminals to justice. As you're aware, we have reached out to our regional partners and international partners to ensure that we have all the resources necessary, human, and technical resources necessary to bring those criminals to justice.
Yes. And now the former president and your political opponent, David Granger, he has backed the protesters. So I want to know, how do you see what is happening in the country, and what are your plans to address those racial tensions?
Well, you know, in any situation like that, there's what you call political action. And you can be politically mature or you can be politically immature. Now, it is up to all those who examine the action of the former president and leader of the opposition to decide which one they were. But when you exploit a tense situation for political gain, it does nothing for the country. It does nothing for the people of the country. It does nothing for society. But again, as I said, these are challenges and circumstances that we have to deal with.
And we want to say that our hearts go out to the families of all of these victims. And as America prepares to usher in a new administration, we hope that police reform will prevail and that political and justice systems begin to change in ways that work for all. Well, another big social change this year, the government of Barbados proposed recognition of same-sex unions.
My government is prepared to recognize a form of civil unions for couples of the same gender, so as to ensure that no human being in Barbados will be discriminated against in exercise of civil rights that ought to be theirs. The settlement of Barbados was birthed and fostered in discrimination. But the time has come for us to end discrimination in all forms.
Now, coming up, we are going to take a look back at the year in music and culture. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Caribbean Times News 2020 Year in Review. Well, as with almost every other aspect of our lives, the COVID-19 pandemic forced the entertainment industry to come to a screeching halt. Events like concerts and carnivals were either canceled, postponed, or held virtually. In New York, I know I missed the West Indian American Day Parade, which was celebrated online for the first time ever.
Ladies, standing on them. Take it slow, so they move in control. We are rushing the road and now we take it with time.
Artists around the globe have been forced to reinvent how they entertain their fans. Performing on a stage in front of huge crowds has turned into live streaming from living rooms. In my recent conversation with the Barbados-based Queen of Soca, Alison Hines, she told us about how she's adapting to her new life as a virtual performer.
I said, what is it like performing during these unprecedented times?
It's weird. It's strange, to say the least. I've done a lot of virtual performances, and so I'm performing from my house, and it's good in that I don't have to travel and go anywhere. You know, I could get all gussied up in my house and go and move all the furniture and perform, and then just walk over and I'm done. It's an adjustment, it's about adapting.
After such a tumultuous year, good holiday food and music may be just what the doctor ordered. We spoke with children's author Yolanda Marshall about her book, A Piece of Black Cake for Santa, and those Christmas traditions that we all look forward to.
like a classic book that will never age, and any kid could have it, because in my home, I ate black cake. And if I'm supposed to leave something for Santa, it'll be black cake and Moby and sorrel and pastels and all these foods, right? We don't want cookies, right? So a piece of black cake for Santa really highlighted our traditions. And, you know, you have a kid, of course, from Trinidad and a kid from Barbados, and they're talking about, hey, you know, I'm going to bring pastels, I'm going to bring jug, and just little things that they eat at home and leave it for Santa. But it's just, it's preserving our traditional way of celebrating Christmas.
And while we may not be able to celebrate Christmas in all of the ways that we're used to, like festivals and parades this year, we can still enjoy music with Shaggy's new Christmas album, Christmas in the Islands.
It's Christmas on the islands, the islands.
Sunshine on a silhouette, Caribbean vibes the best. A place where the girls play hard to get. Can't believe my heart she get. Baby, that day I don't regret. A Christmas I won't forget.
Add that to your playlist. Well, for the entire Caribbean Times News team, I'm Alisha Davis, wishing you and your family happy holidays and much health and prosperity in 2021. We hope that you'll join us again next year as we bring you the latest news from the Caribbean.